Have you ever been looked at like a paycheck by your own blood? I turned 18 yesterday and quietly locked my inheritance into an irrevocable trust by sunrise. My family arrived with a moving truck, ordering me to leave my house, but they missed the man in the suit waiting on the porch. He was holding a clipboard that would make their blood run cold. My name is Brooke Callahan, and for exactly 18 years, I have been the supporting character in the reality show that is my family. The realization did not hit me all at once like a lightning strike. It was a slow accumulation of evidence, like dust settling on an unused shelf. It was in the way the family photo albums were weighted heavily toward the years before my brother was born, and heavily toward the years after he started playing varsity football. It was in the way my achievements were greeted with a polite nod, while his mediocre attempts at existing were met with parades. But tonight, on my 18th birthday, the dynamic was supposed to be different. We were at the cabin. Grandma's cabin. It sat perched on the edge of a ridge in the Blue Ridge Mountains, a structure of cedar and stone that smelled of wood smoke and old paper. The air up here was thin and crisp, cutting through the humidity of late summer. Inside, the great room was filled with the artificial warmth of people trying too hard. My mother had strung fairy lights across the heavy timber beams, and my father was pouring expensive scotch into crystal tumblers. My younger brother, Logan, was currently the loudest thing in the room, recounting a story about a prank he had pulled at school that my parents found hilarious, but would have likely grounded me for. "To Brooke," my father announced, raising his glass. His face was flushed, likely from the third drink rather than paternal pride. 18 years old, an adult. "To Brooke," my mother echoed, her smile tight. It was the smile she used when she was trying to be polite to a cashier she thought was moving too slow. "Our big girl." I raised my glass of sparkling cider, mirroring their smiles. I had perfected this mirror over a decade. If they smiled, I smiled. If they frowned, I looked concerned. It was a survival mechanism. Do not make waves. Do not be difficult. Be the low-maintenance asset. "Happy birthday, sis," Logan said, punching me lightly on the arm. He did not look me in the eye. He was already scanning the room, bored, vibrating with the energy of a 16-year-old who knew he was the center of the universe regardless of whose name was on the cake. "Thanks, Logan," I said. The cake was cut. Pictures were taken. I blew out the candles, 18 of them, and made a wish that had nothing to do with happiness and everything to do with freedom. The noise of the party, though it was only 4 of us and my Uncle Derek who had driven up an hour late, felt deafening. They were talking about the view. They were talking about the property line. They were talking about how the market in this area was exploding. They were talking about everything except me. "I am going to step out for some fresh air," I said during a lull in the conversation. "Just need a moment." "Don't go far, honey," Mom said, already turning back to Uncle Derek. "We need to talk about the plans for next week." I nodded and slipped out the heavy oak front door. The silence of the mountain was immediate and absolute. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a bruised purple that was fading fast into black. The wind rustled the pine needles, a sound like ocean waves crashing in slow motion. I walked to the edge of the wraparound porch, the wood cool beneath my bare feet. I leaned against the railing, the same railing I had helped Grandma sand and varnish 3 summers ago, and pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from adrenaline. This was the moment, the singular point in time I had been driving toward since the reading of Grandma's will 6 months ago. I unlocked my phone. The screen brightness was turned all the way down, casting a faint glow on my face. I opened the secure email app. There it was, a message from Elliot Vance, the attorney Grandma had trusted more than her own son. The subject line was innocuous: "Final documents for review." I tapped it. The document loaded. It was dense with legal jargon, pages and pages of it, but I knew what it said. I had memorized the terms during secret lunch meetings with Elliot over the last 2 months. It was the creation of an irrevocable trust. The concept was simple, even if the execution was terrifying. Once I signed this, The assets, this cabin, the land, the investment accounts Grandma had left me, would move out of my personal name and into the trust. I would be the beneficiary, but I would not be the legal owner in a way that allowed me to sell it. And more importantly, it meant no one could force me to sell it. It meant that if my parents tried to guilt me, or my uncle tried to pressure me, or if they tried to claim I was too young to manage it, they would be hitting a wall of concrete legal protection. I scrolled to the bottom. Sign here. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could hear laughter coming from inside the house. It was a boisterous, greedy sound. Uncle Derek was saying something about subdividing the lower lot. That sound was the catalyst. It reminded me of why I was doing this. It reminded me of Grandma. I closed my eyes and saw her face. She had been a tough woman, leather-skinned from gardening and sharp-eyed from a lifetime of watching people try to take advantage of her kindness. I remembered the last time we sat on this very porch, wrapped in blankets, drinking hot cocoa that was too sweet. "Brooke," she had said, her voice raspy like dry leaves, "you have a good heart, but a good heart is a target in this family." She had gripped my hand with surprising strength. "When I am gone, they will see dollar signs. They will see this roof as a commodity. Do not let them turn my home into a bank account. Do not let them strip you of your security just to fund their lifestyle." "I won't, Grandma," I had promised. "Promising is easy," she had countered. "Protecting yourself is hard. You have to be willing to be the bad guy in their story to be the hero in yours." I opened my eyes. The mountain air bit at my cheeks. I pressed the button. Execute digital signature. Face ID scanned my features. A small spinning wheel appeared on the screen. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Document signed. Filing with county clerk initiated. It was done. There were no fireworks. The sky did not split open. The only physical change was the sudden, sharp drop in my heart rate. The panic vanished, replaced by a cold, crystallized clarity. The house behind me, the ground beneath me. It was safe. It was locked away. I had just moved millions of dollars out of their reach, and they were sitting 10 yards away, drinking scotch bought with money they probably borrowed, completely oblivious. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of pine and damp earth, filling my lungs with the first real breath of freedom I had ever taken. Then, I turned around and walked back into the lion's den. "There she is," Dad boomed as I re-entered the warmth of the living room. "We were just wondering if the bears got you." "Just needed to stretch my legs," I said, my voice steady. I walked over to the table and picked up my cider. I took a sip. It tasted sweet and crisp. I sat down on the leather sofa, crossing my legs, assuming the posture of the obedient daughter. I watched them. I really watched them. I saw the way Uncle Derek's eyes kept darting to the structural beams, calculating their worth. I saw the way Mom was looking at the antique fireplace mantel, not admiring the craftsmanship, but probably wondering what it would fetch at an auction. They were vultures circling a body that was not dead yet. "So, Brooke," Dad said, settling into the armchair opposite me. He swirled his drink, the ice clinking against the glass. "Now that you are 18, we need to handle some adult business, regarding the estate." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face smooth. "Oh? It is a lot of responsibility," Mom chimed in, leaning forward. Her voice took on that sugary, manipulative tone she used when she wanted something. "Taxes, insurance, maintenance. It is too much for a young girl starting college. We have been talking, and we think the best thing to do is to get the title transferred so your father and I can manage it for you, just to keep things safe." "Safe," I repeated. The word tasted like ash. "Exactly," Dad said. "We can liquidate some of the land to set up a nice little nest egg for you. Maybe buy a condo near campus, and we can handle the sale of the cabin so you do not have to deal with realtors." The sale of the cabin. They did not even pretend they wanted to keep it. "We can talk about it later," Dad said, dismissing the topic as if my agreement was a foregone conclusion. He turned to Mom. She is old enough now. The paperwork will be easy. I will have the notary come by tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow?" I asked. "No point waiting," Dad said, chuckling. "Strike while the iron is hot. Right, Derek?" "Absolutely," Derek agreed, grinning. "Market is peaking." "Right," I said softly. "Tomorrow." I finished my cider. I endured another hour of their planning. They planned renovations for a house they intended to flip. They planned vacations with money they thought was coming. Logan talked about the new truck he wanted, a massive thing that cost $80,000, and Dad told him, "Maybe for Christmas, son. We will see how things shake out this month." They were spending my inheritance before the ink was even dry on their imaginary contracts. Eventually, the party wound down. Uncle Derek passed out in the guest room. Mom and Dad retired to the master suite, Grandma's room, which felt like a violation in itself. Logan fell asleep on the couch with the TV blaring. I stayed up. I sat in the rocking chair by the stone fireplace, watching the embers glow and fade. The house was quiet now, settling into the night with the groans and creaks of old timber. I looked at the flames. They danced and twisted, consuming the wood, turning structure into smoke. That was what my family wanted to do. They wanted to consume this place. They wanted to consume me. But they were too late. I looked at the clock on the mantel. It was just past midnight. I knew what was coming when the sun rose. I knew Dad had not just invited a notary. I knew the moving truck comment Logan had made earlier as a joke was not actually a joke. They were so confident, so arrogant in their control over me, that they had probably already scheduled the movers to clear out Grandma's junk. Let them come. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. I was not the victim anymore. I was the trap. And tomorrow morning, they were going to step right into it, to understand why I sat by that fire with a heart made of stone. You have to understand the architecture of my loneliness. It was not built in a day. It was constructed brick by brick, year by year, through thousands of dinner-table silences and an endless parade of double standards. I can pinpoint the exact week the foundation was laid. I was 14 years old. That Tuesday, I came home with a thick envelope from St. Augustine's Preparatory Academy. It was the kind of school where senators sent their children, a place with ivy-covered walls and a tuition fee that cost more than most people's cars. I had not just gotten in. I had secured the founder's scholarship. It covered 100% of the fees. It was the result of 3 years of straight A's, weekends spent studying while my friends went to the mall, and an essay I had rewritten 12 times until my fingers cramped. I placed the letter on the center of the kitchen island, right next to my father's car keys, ensuring it was impossible to miss. When my parents came home, I waited in the living room, pretending to read a book, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I heard the front door open. I heard the rustle of paper. "Oh," my mother said. Her voice was flat, devoid of any inflection. "Brooke got into that private school." "Which one?" my father asked, his voice muffled, likely because he was already looking into the refrigerator. "The one downtown. Says she got a scholarship." "That is nice," my father said. Then, the refrigerator door sucked shut. "Hey, did you pick up the dry cleaning? I need my blue suit for the conference tomorrow." That was it. "That is nice." 2 words, no hug, no, "We are so proud of you," no celebratory dinner. The letter was pushed aside so my father could put his keys down, and eventually, it was buried under a stack of junk mail. I retrieved it later that night, smoothing out a wrinkle in the corner, and filed it away in my desk drawer. I told myself they were just tired. I told myself that adults were busy and that my achievement was simply expected. 2 days later, my brother Logan was suspended from public school for 3 days. He had been caught in the locker room with a vape pen and had cursed out the vice principal when confronted. It was a stupid, reckless act of defiance. By all logic, he should have been grounded until he was 30. Instead, my parents ordered 3 extra-large pizzas and a case of soda. "We need to rally around him," my mother told me as she set the table, her eyes bright with a frantic sort of energy. He is going through a hard time. Teenage boys are sensitive. He needs to know his family is his fortress. I sat at that table, watching Logan stuff his face with pepperoni pizza, looking smug rather than remorseful. My father clapped him on the shoulder, giving him a pep talk about how great men often had trouble with authority figures in their youth. They spun his delinquency into a narrative of misunderstood genius. They celebrated his failure because it gave them a problem to fix, a role to play. My success, on the other hand, required nothing from them, so it meant nothing to them. That night, I went to my room and quietly celebrated my scholarship by eating a stale granola bar and staring at the ceiling. I did not cry. I just felt a small, cold knot tie itself in the center of my chest. It was the realization that in the economy of this family, my currency was worthless. The lesson cemented itself 6 months later. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the sound of shattering glass tore through the neighborhood. Logan had been hitting baseballs in the front yard, ignoring the rule about aiming away from the street. He had put a fastball right through the windshield of Mrs. Gable's restored vintage convertible. Mrs. Gable was furious. She was screaming on the sidewalk, pointing at the spiderweb fracture in the glass. Logan stood there, looking pale and terrified. My father marched out, checkbook in hand. He did not yell at Logan. He did not tell Logan to apologize. He walked straight to Mrs. Gable, turned on his charm, and wrote a check for $2,000 on the spot. "Boys will be boys," he said with a conspiratorial chuckle, handing her the slip of paper. "Let us get that fixed up for you. No harm done." When they came back inside, my father ruffled Logan's hair. "Be more careful next time, sport. That was an expensive pitch." There was no punishment, no deduction from his allowance. The money had washed the sin away instantly. It felt less like a penalty and more like a transaction fee for being the favorite. I watched from the top of the stairs, invisible in the shadows. I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that if I had broken that windshield, the reaction would have been nuclear. There would have been lectures about responsibility, about how hard money was to earn, about how I had embarrassed the family name. The rule was unwritten but absolute. Brooke must be perfect to be tolerated. Logan is allowed to fail to be loved. I adapted. It was a matter of survival. I stopped bringing home my report cards. I stopped mentioning the awards I won for the debate team. When I twisted my ankle at track practice, I iced it myself and walked on it without limping until it healed. Because asking for help felt like handing them a weapon. I learned to become a ghost in my own house. I developed a new skill, one that would serve me well on the night of my 18th birthday. I learned to watch. I watched the way my mother's eyes narrowed when she was calculating how much something cost. I watched the way my father's jaw clenched when he was lying. I listened to the tone of their voices when they thought I was not around. I cataloged their greed, their vanity, and their desperate need to appear wealthy even when the credit card bills were piling up on the counter. I saw the way they looked at me. They did not see a daughter. They saw a retirement plan. They saw a safety net. "Brooke is the smart one," they would tell their friends. "She will take care of us." It made my skin crawl. The only place I could breathe was the cabin. Every summer, Grandma would take me up to the mountain for 2 weeks, just the two of us. No Logan, no parents, just the smell of cedar and the sound of the wind. It was during the summer I turned 16 that the cabin ceased to be just a vacation spot and became a lifeline. We were sitting on the porch swing, snapping beans for dinner. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and pink. Grandma had stopped working and was looking at me with an intensity that made me pause. "You are too quiet, Brooke," she said. It was not an accusation. It was an observation. "I am just thinking," I lied. "You are holding your breath," she corrected. "You have been holding your breath for years. You think if you are quiet enough, they will not drain you dry." I looked down at the green beans in my lap. I could not speak, because the lump in my throat was too large. "Your father," she continued, her voice hard as flint, "he sees the world as a series of things he is owed. He thinks he is owed respect he has not earned and money he has not worked for. and your mother is too afraid of losing his approval to stop him." She reached out and took my chin in her hand, forcing me to look at her. Her eyes were milky with age but sharp with intelligence. "This place," she said, gesturing to the timber beams around us. "This land, it is not just an asset, Brooke, it is a fortress. My father built this with his own hands. I kept it through a divorce and a recession. I did not keep it so your father could sell it to a developer and buy a boat." "I know," I whispered. "Do you?" She leaned in closer. "When I go, they will come for it. They will come for everything. They will tell you that family shares. They will tell you that you are selfish for keeping it. They will use every guilt trip in the book." "I won't let them have it," I said, and for the first time, I felt a spark of anger mix with the sadness. "Then you have to be smarter than them," Grandma said. "You cannot just say no. You have to make it impossible for them to say yes. You have to protect your future like it is a living thing, because to them, it is just a harvest." That conversation replayed in my head every single day for the next 2 years. When Grandma died, the grief was a heavy, suffocating blanket, but while my parents were crying theatrically at the funeral, glancing around to see who was watching their performance, I was dry-eyed and rigid. I was not just mourning her, I was preparing for war. I saw the way Uncle Derek walked around the cabin after the funeral service, tapping the walls, checking the foundation. I saw my father on the phone with a contractor, asking about zoning laws for luxury rentals. They had not even waited for the grass to grow over her grave before they started mentally spending the money. They thought I was the same quiet, compliant girl who accepted the lack of birthday parties and the double standards. They thought I was the girl who fixed her own problems and never asked for anything. They were right about one thing. I was the girl who fixed her own problems. But they forgot that I had spent 4 years watching them. I knew their playbook better than they did. I knew that appeals to emotion would not work on people who viewed relationships as transactions. I knew that fairness was a foreign concept to them. So, I did what I had learned to do best. I stayed silent. I let them plan. I let them dream about the millions they thought they were about to inherit through me. I let them believe I was weak. Because the most dangerous person in the room is never the one shouting threats. It is the one sitting quietly in the corner, holding the match, waiting for the wind to change. And as I stared at the dying fire on the eve of my eviction, I knew the wind had finally shifted. They had spent years teaching me that I was on my own. Tomorrow, I was going to show them exactly what that looked like. If the house I grew up in was a monument to conditional love, the cabin on the ridge was a sanctuary built on sweat and honest labor. My connection to this place was not born from ownership papers or a sense of entitlement. It was born from the smell of turpentine, the grit of sandpaper under my fingernails, and the ache in my shoulders after a long day of work under the July sun. I remember the summer I turned 15 perfectly. That was the year Grandma decided the wraparound porch needed to be stripped and repainted. My father had offered to hire a crew to do it, arguing that it would be faster and that Grandma was too old for such manual labor, but Grandma had scoffed at him, waving her hand as if dismissing a bad smell. She told him that a hired hand does the job to get paid, but an owner does the job to make it last. So it was just the two of us. We spent 3 weeks on our knees, scraping away layers of peeling gray paint that had been applied decades before I was born. It was tedious, repetitive work. The heat in the mountains could be deceptive. The air was thin, but the sun was fierce. I remember complaining on the second day, whining about a blister on my thumb and asking why we could not just paint over the old stuff. Grandma stopped sanding. She wiped her forehead with a rag she kept tucked in her apron pocket and looked at me with that piercing, bird-like gaze of hers. "If you paint over the rot, Brooke, you are just dressing up a corpse," she told me. "You have to strip it down to the bare wood. You have to see what is underneath. If the foundation is good, the paint will hold. If you cheat the wood will punish you later." We went back to work. I learned the rhythm of it. I learned to respect the grain of the wood. I learned that there was a profound satisfaction in seeing the raw, honey-colored cedar emerge from beneath the gray decay. By the time we applied the final coat of sealant, watching the wood drink it up and glow in the sunset, I felt a sense of pride that no report card or debate trophy had ever given me. I had added my own labor to the legacy of this house. I had bled a little for it. I belonged to it as much as it belonged to me. Those evenings on the porch, after the tools were put away, were when I really learned who my grandmother was. She was not just the stern matriarch who handed out envelopes of cash at Christmas. She was a survivor. She told me stories about her own family, stories that were conspicuously absent from the sanitized versions my father liked to tell. She told me about a brother who had gambled away their parents' farm, and a sister who had borrowed money for a business venture that never existed. She spoke of them not with hatred, but with a weary sort of pity. "I loved them," she said one night, rocking in her chair as the cicadas hummed in the trees. "But love does not mean you hand someone the knife they are going to stab you with. I had to learn to say no. It was the hardest word I ever learned, but it was the only one that saved me." There was one night in particular that seared itself into my memory. A summer storm had rolled in over the ridge, the kind that shakes the windows and turns the sky a bruised purple. The rain was hammering against the tin roof, a deafening, comforting roar that isolated us from the rest of the world. We were sitting by the stone fireplace, drinking tea, and the conversation turned, as it often did, to my father. Grandma stared into the fire, her face illuminated by the dancing orange light. "Your father is not a bad man in his soul, Brooke," she said softly, "but he is a weak one, and weak men are dangerous because they are always looking for a shortcut." I stayed silent, clutching my mug. "He looks at this mountain," she continued, gesturing vaguely toward the dark windows, "and he does not see the history. He does not see the trees your grandfather planted. He does not see the place where I healed after he died. He sees a number. He sees a subdivision. He sees a way to fix his mistakes without doing the work." She turned to me, her eyes locking onto mine. "Your father looks at everything by its price tag, never its value. Do not ever let him teach you to do the same." That sentence hit me with the force of a physical blow. Price versus value. It explained everything. It explained why he bought expensive gifts but gave no affection. It explained why he tipped big in public but pinched pennies in private. It explained why I was only worth attention when I was achieving something that made him look good. To him, I was an asset with an appreciating market value. When Grandma died 2 years later, the truth of her words played out in the courtroom with sickening precision. The reading of the will was held in Elliot Vance's office in town. The room smelled of old leather and lemon polish. My entire family was there. Mom, Dad, Logan, and Uncle Derek. They were all dressed in somber black, wearing expressions of practiced mourning, but there was an energy in the room that had nothing to do with grief. It was a buzzing, electric tension. It was the energy of a pack of wolves circling a fresh kill. I sat in the corner, feeling small and cold. I missed her so much it felt like a physical hollow in my chest. I wanted to be back on the porch sanding the railing, not here in this sterile room listening to legal jargon. Mr. Vance cleared his throat and began to read. He went through the small bequests first. Jewelry to a cousin, a donation to the local library. My parents nodded along, impatient, their eyes darting to the thick folder on the desk that concerned the real estate. "And to my granddaughter, Brooke Callahan," Mr. Vance read, his voice steady. "I leave the property at Black Ridge, including the cabin and all contents therein, as well as the adjoining 40 acres of land." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, the air left the room. My father blinked. Once, twice. "Excuse me?" he said, a nervous chuckle bubbling up from his throat. "I think you misread that. Elliot, the cabin stays in the family trust, under my management. That was what we discussed last Christmas. The will was updated 6 months ago." "Rick," Mr. Vance said, peering over his glasses, "it is quite specific. The title goes directly to Brooke." My mother let out a sharp gasp. Uncle Derek leaned back in his chair. rubbing his face with his hands. Logan just looked confused, asking, "Wait, so Brooke gets the cool house? What do I get?" "You get the vintage Mustang," Mr. Vance said. "Sweet," Logan said, satisfied. But my parents were not satisfied. They were devastated. Not because they had lost a mother, but because they had lost a jackpot. I saw the look they exchanged. It was a look of panic. They had likely already counted on that money. They probably had debts I knew nothing about, holes they planned to fill with the sale of my sanctuary. Then, slowly, the panic shifted into something else. My father turned to look at me. The anger in his eyes smoothed over, replaced by a terrifyingly soft expression. It was the look a predator gives when it realizes the prey is cornered. "Well," he said, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes, "that is a lot of responsibility for a 16-year-old, but it stays in the family. That is what matters. We will help you manage it. Sweetheart, do not worry about a thing." I felt a chill crawl up my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Manage it. That was the code word. In that moment, receiving the inheritance did not feel like a gift. It felt like I had just been handed a target to wear on my back. Grandma had left me the one thing they wanted most, and she had made me the gatekeeper. In the weeks and months that followed, the dynamic shifted. The neglect I had grown used to was replaced by a suffocating, calculated attention. Suddenly, everyone wanted to visit the cabin. "We should go up and check on the roof," Uncle Derek would say. "Make sure everything is tight for winter." "Let us have a family barbecue up there," Mom would suggest. "Brooke loves that place." I started going with them, not because I wanted to, but because I did not trust them to be there alone. I became a silent sentry in my own house, and because I had learned the art of silence so well, they often forgot I was listening. I started keeping a notebook. It was a small black moleskin that I kept hidden under my mattress at home and in my backpack when we traveled. I began to document everything. July 12th. Uncle Derek walked the eastern property line with a surveyor's tape. I heard him on the phone saying, "The view here is unobstructed. You could put 3 luxury units on this ridge alone." August 4th. Mom walked through the kitchen, tapping the cabinets. "These need to go," she said to Dad. "Open concept is what sells now. If we knock out this wall, we add $10,000 to the asking price easily." September 19th. Dad brought a strange man to the property who he introduced as an insurance adjuster, but I saw the business card falling out of the man's pocket. He was a developer from the city. They never asked me if I wanted to renovate. They never asked me if I liked the view. They spoke about the house in the future tense, a future where I was absent and the bank account was full. "It is just a matter of timing," I heard my father say to my mother late one night when they thought I was asleep in the loft. "She is a minor," my mother whispered back. "We can petition for guardianship of the estate. Say she is incompetent to manage it." "Too risky," Dad replied. "Elliot Vance is watching like a hawk. No, we just wait. She turns 18 in 2 years. She is a good kid. She does what she is told. Once she is legal, we get her to sign the power of attorney. We tell her it is for taxes or liability. She will sign. She always seeks our approval." I lay there in the dark, staring at the rough-hewn beams above my head, clutching my notebook to my chest. They were right about the timing. They were just wrong about the outcome. They were waiting for a birthday. They looked at the calendar and saw a payday approaching. I looked at the calendar and saw a deadline. Every conversation about market value, every fake smile, every unsolicited piece of advice about how overwhelming property ownership was, I wrote it all down. I built a dossier of their greed. I let them believe their own narrative. I let them think I was the passive, eager-to-please daughter who would hand over the keys the moment they asked. Grandma had given me the house, but she had given me something much more valuable on that rainy night by the fire. She had given me the truth about who they were. She had identified their weakness, their arrogance. They thought they were playing chess with a child, never realizing that the child had been taught the game by the grandmaster who built the board. So I waited, I smiled, I nodded, and I counted down the days until I could lock the door forever. The atmosphere around the cabin changed in the 6 months leading up to my 18th birthday. It shifted from a low-grade hum of entitlement to a fever pitch of desperation. The catalyst was not familial love or a sudden interest in nature. It was a rumor that started circulating in the county planning office and spread through the local real estate blogs like wildfire. A massive luxury eco-resort was being planned for the valley just 2 miles south of our ridge. Suddenly, the quaint old shack my family had tolerated became the hottest ticket in the state. Land values in the area did not just rise, they exploded. Listings that had sat stagnant for years were suddenly closing for 50% over asking price in cash wars. The sharks smelled blood in the water, and unfortunately, the sharks were my parents and my uncle. The visits to the mountain became incessant, every weekend, without fail. I would hear the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. Uncle Derek was usually the first to arrive. He had lost his job as a mid-level logistics manager 3 months prior, a fact he blamed on corporate restructuring rather than his habit of showing up at noon on Tuesdays. Since then, his interest in my property boundaries had become obsessive. I remember one specific Saturday in late October. The leaves were turning a brilliant, burning crimson, but Derek did not care about the foliage. He was pacing the southern edge of the property, holding a laser rangefinder he had probably bought on credit. "You see this access road? Brooke?" he called out to me as I sat on the porch steps. Pretending to read a textbook, he pointed down the slope toward a deer trail. "If we widen this to 20 feet and pave it, we can claim it as a secondary easement. That adds at least $50,000 to the appraisal value for the lower lot." "It is a deer trail, Uncle Derek," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I like the deer." He marched up the steps, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked manic, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "The deer do not pay the bills. Brooke, you have to think big picture. This market is a bubble. It could pop next week. We need to be ready to move when the iron is hot." He kept saying, we need to be ready. We can claim. My parents were more subtle, but far more insidious. They adopted a strategy of concern, framing their greed as parental protection. They would sit me down at the kitchen table in our suburban house during the week, usually after a dinner where they had been unusually generous with the portions. "We have been looking at the property tax assessments for the coming year," my father said one Tuesday evening, sliding a piece of paper across the granite countertop. "With the new valuation due to the resort rumors, the taxes on the cabin are going to triple. We are looking at maybe $12,000 a year, just for taxes." He let the number hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. "That is a lot of money for a student," my mother added, shaking her head with performative worry. "You are going to be busy with classes. Brooke, you cannot work enough shifts at a coffee shop to cover that. And that is before insurance, maintenance, and utilities. If the roof goes, that is another $15,000. "I have the savings Grandma left in the account," I said quietly. "It is enough to cover the taxes for at least 5 years. My father sighed, a sound of immense patience, as if he were explaining quantum physics to a toddler. "Honey, you do not burn capital on carrying costs. That is financial suicide. You use that capital to invest. If we sell the cabin now, while the hype is high, we could net maybe $1.2 million. You put that in a diversified portfolio, and you are set for life. You do not have to worry about leaky pipes or trespassers." "But I like the cabin," I said. "I like the leaky pipes." "You are being sentimental," my mother said, her voice sharpening just a fraction. "Sentimentality is a luxury you cannot afford. We are trying to keep you from drowning. Brooke, one bad winter, one storm, and that place becomes a money pit that ruins your credit score before you even graduate." They never asked me if I wanted to keep it. They never asked if I planned to live there one day or raise my own children there. The conversation was always binary: keep it and face financial ruin, or sell it and let them manage the windfall. Then there was Logan. My brother did not understand taxes or market bubbles. He only understood immediate gratification. He had been browsing car websites for weeks, leaving tabs open on the family computer. He was not looking at practical sedans for college. He was looking at lifted trucks with custom leather interiors, vehicles that cost nearly $90,000. One afternoon, while I was folding laundry, he leaned against the doorframe, chewing on an apple. "So," he said, "Dad says you guys are selling the cabin before Christmas." "Dad says a lot of things," I replied, not looking up. "If you get, like, $1 million for it," he said, doing the math in his head. "That is plenty for everyone, right? I was thinking, since I'm getting my license soon, it would make sense if we got the truck now, for tax purposes or whatever." I paused, holding one of his t-shirts. "You think I should sell my house so you can buy a truck?" He shrugged, completely unbothered by the absurdity of the statement. "I mean, we are family. What are you going to do with all that money anyway? You are just going to hoard it. Dad said the sale covers everyone's needs. I need a truck." He did not ask. He expected. To him. My inheritance was just a family bank account that he had not been given the PIN code to yet. The pressure ramped up as the weeks turned into months. My phone became a battlefield. Uncle Derek started texting me at all hours. He would send links to articles with titles like "The Coming Real Estate Crash" or "Why Smart Investors Are Cashing Out Now." He sent me Zillow listings of neighboring properties that had sold, circling the final sale prices in bright red markup tools. "Look at this one, Brooke," he texted at 2 a.m. "Smaller lot than yours. Sold for $800,000. We could get more. I have a buddy in real estate who says he has a cash buyer lined up. No inspection, quick close, just say the word." He was not helping me. He was hunting me. I could smell the desperation on him through the screen. I knew he had gambling debts. I had overheard my mother whispering about it on the phone to her sister. He needed his cut of the commission, or perhaps a finder's fee he planned to extract from my father, to keep his own wolves at bay. I never argued with them. I learned early on that arguing gave them data. If I said, "I do not want to sell because I love the view," they would find a way to monetize the view or argue that I could buy a better view elsewhere. If I said, "It is my decision," they would attack my maturity. So, I used the gray rock method. I made myself as uninteresting and non-committal as a stone. "I will think about it," I would tell my father. "That is an interesting point," I would text back to Derek. "We can discuss it later," I would say to Mom. They interpreted my lack of fighting as slow submission. They thought they were wearing me down. In reality, I was building a fortress of evidence. Every text Derek sent, I screenshotted and saved to a cloud drive they did not know existed. Every voicemail my father left, detailing how he had already spoken to a broker just to get an idea. I transcribed. I kept a log of every time they showed up at the property without my permission. I was not just being paranoid, I was preparing for the legal battle I knew was inevitable. The turning point, the moment I knew there was no going back, came 2 weeks before the party. I was in the kitchen, making tea. My father walked in, looking pleased with himself. He was holding a manila folder. "Brooke," he said, casually leaning against the counter, "I was thinking, since your birthday is coming up, we should streamline things. I had the lawyer draw up some transfer papers. Just standard stuff to move the title into a family LLC. I will be the managing partner. You will be a silent partner. It protects you from liability if someone slips and falls on the property, and it makes it much easier to handle the sale when we are ready." He placed the folder on the table. He did not open it. He just patted it, affectionate and deadly. "We can sign it the morning after your party," he said. "Sort of a rite of passage, entering the adult world of business." I looked at the folder. Transfer papers. He was not even trying to hide it anymore. He wanted me to sign away my ownership under the guise of protection before I had even blown out my candles. He wanted to own the LLC, which meant he would control the sale, the money, and the distribution. I would be left with a silent partnership and whatever allowance he deemed fit to dole out. "Sure, Dad," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "That sounds like a smart plan. We can look at it after the birthday." "Good girl," he said, I knew you would see reason." He walked away, whistling. I stood there, staring at the folder. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a cold, hard rage. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was so desperate for his approval that I would sign away my birthright just to hear him say, "Good girl." That was the mistake that would cost him everything. I went upstairs to my room and pulled out my laptop. I did not open his folder. I did not need to. I knew exactly what a transfer of deed looked like. Instead, I opened my email and drafted a message to Elliot Vance. "Mr. Vance," I typed, "they are moving up the timeline. My father has transfer papers ready. We need to execute the trust option immediately upon my turning 18. Is everything ready for the digital signature?" His reply came 3 minutes later. "Everything is loaded in the secure portal. The second the clock strikes midnight on your birthday, the system will accept your credential. Do not sign anything they give you. Do not even touch a pen." I closed the laptop and sat back in my chair. I looked around my bedroom, the room in their house, where I was a guest, a burden, an investment. Then I thought of the cabin. I thought of the way the light hit the floorboards in the morning. I thought of the silence that did not demand anything from me. They wanted to play a game of high-stakes real estate. They wanted to use legal structures and LLCs to strip me bare. They thought they were the only ones who knew how the system worked. But they had forgotten that I was the one who had spent my summers listening to the woman who built the empire they were trying to loot. If they wanted to use the law to steal, I would use the law to bury them. "We will look at it after the birthday," I whispered to the empty room, repeating the lie I had told my father. And I meant it. We would look at it, but by the time we did, the property would be gone, vanished into the vault of an irrevocable trust, and they would be standing on the porch holding nothing but their own greed. 3 days before the party, I skipped my last period of AP English and took 2 buses to the edge of town. Elliot Vance's office was not located in the glass and steel financial district where my father liked to hold his meetings. It was tucked away in a converted brick row house on a quiet street lined with oak trees. There was no receptionist with a headset, no espresso machine in the lobby, and no abstract art on the walls to impress clients. When I walked in, a bell chimed above the door, the kind you would find in an old grocery store. The air smelled of lemon oil, dust, and the heavy, sweet scent of old books. Elliot was waiting for me. He looked exactly as he had at Grandma's funeral. A man carved out of teak wood, lined and weathered but incredibly solid. He did not treat me like a teenager cutting class. He stood up, buttoned his suit jacket, and shook my hand with the same gravity he would offer a CEO. "Miss Callahan," he said, "please, sit down." We sat in leather chairs that groaned under our weight. Between us lay a mahogany desk covered in neat stacks of files. One file, thicker than the rest, sat directly in front of me. "We are cutting it close," Elliot said, his voice gravelly and low. "But we are ready. I have drafted the trust instrument exactly as your grandmother and I discussed years ago, updated with the current asset valuations." He opened the folder. The paper was heavy, cream-colored, and dense with text. "I want to be absolutely clear about what this means. Brooke," he said, leaning forward, his elbows on the desk. "We are creating an irrevocable trust. Do you understand the weight of that second word? Irrevocable." "It means I cannot change it," I said. "It means no one can change it," he corrected. "Not you, not me. Certainly not your parents. Once you execute this, the ownership of the Black Ridge property and the investment accounts transfers from you, the individual, to the trust entity. You become the beneficiary, but you lose the power of direct ownership. You cannot wake up next week and decide to sell the cabin because you want a sports car. You cannot be guilt-tripped into signing it over to your father because legally, you do not have the power to do so. The trust owns it, and the trust is governed by a strict set of rules that I will oversee as the trustee." I nodded, feeling the magnitude of the decision settling on my shoulders. So if my dad screams at me to sign the deed, I can honestly tell him I cannot do it. "Precisely," Elliot said. It is what we call a poison pill in the corporate world, but here, it is a shield. It removes the target from your back because you no longer hold the weapon. I ran my hand over the paper. What about the bills? My parents keep saying the taxes and maintenance will drown me. Fear tactics, Elliot said dismissively. The investment portfolio your grandmother left is substantial. It is designed to generate yield. The trust will pay the property taxes, the insurance, and the maintenance costs directly from those dividends. You will receive a quarterly stipend for living expenses while you are in college. But the principal remains untouched. You could live in that cabin for the rest of your life and never pay a dime out of your own pocket for a roof repair. It sounded perfect. It sounded like the fortress Grandma had promised me. But then, Elliot closed the folder and looked at me. The professional mask slipped just a fraction, revealing a deep, sorrowful concern. The legal side is airtight. Brooke, he said softly, I am not worried about the law. I am worried about you. I blinked. Me? I am fine. Are you? He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. You are about to declare war on your own blood. When you push that button on your birthday, you are not just moving money. You are cutting the cord. Your parents. People like them do not react well when they lose control. They will not just be angry, they will be vicious. He looked me dead in the eye. Are you ready to lose them? Because there is a very high probability that once the money is off the table, they will walk away from you entirely. The question hung in the silence between us, vibrating like a plucked string. Am I ready to lose them? For a second, the resolve I had built up over years of neglect wavered. My mind betrayed me, flashing through a highlight reel of the few moments where we had actually looked like a family. I remembered a trip to the Outer Banks when I was 7. I had stepped on a jellyfish, and my father had carried me all the way back to the rental house, whispering that I was his brave girl. I remembered a night in middle school when I was crying over a failed science project, and my mother had stayed up until 2 a.m. helping me glue moss onto a diorama, her hands covered in green paint, actually laughing with me. I remembered the way they looked at Logan, the fierce, protective love they poured into him. Part of me, the part that was still a little girl, desperately wanted to believe that if I just tried hard enough, if I was good enough, if I gave them what they wanted, they would look at me like that too. If I signed this paper, I was killing that hope. I was accepting that I would be an orphan with living parents. My voice cracked. I looked down at my hands. Maybe they are just stressed. Maybe if I explain it to them. Elliot did not interrupt. He just waited. Then, another memory pushed its way to the front. I remembered the way my father had looked at the cabin last week. He had not been looking at the sunset. He had been looking at the land like a butcher looks at a carcass, deciding which cuts would bring the most profit. I remembered the conversation I had overheard about the transfer papers. They were not stressed. They were calculating. I remembered the way they had looked at me when I got the scholarship. Indifferent. And I compared it to the way they looked at me when the resort rumors started. Hungry. They did not love me. They loved the potential of me. They loved what I could provide. If I gave them the house, they would not love me more. They would just respect me less. They would take the money, spend it on cars for Logan and bad investments for Dad. And when the well ran dry, I would be discarded anyway. The warm memory of the beach trip dissolved, replaced by the cold reality of the transfer papers waiting on the kitchen table. I took a deep breath. The air in the office felt thinner, sharper. They lost me a long time ago. Mr. Vance, I said. My voice was steady now. They just have not realized it because I have not stopped being useful yet. Elliot nodded slowly. He put his glasses back on. Good, because you need to be prepared for what comes next. When they realize the money is gone, they will try everything. Guilt, threats, public shaming. He paused, his expression darkening. And Brooke, be very careful with what you sign in the next 48 hours. Before you turn 18, you are legally vulnerable. I have seen families like yours do desperate things. They might try to get you to sign a document backdated to before your birthday. They might try to forge your signature. My stomach dropped. Forge it? It happens more often than you think, Elliot said grimly. When millions are on the line, morality tends to become flexible. That is why we are setting up the digital execution with two-factor authentication and a biometric scan. It proves it was you, and it proves exactly when you did it. It creates a digital timestamp that holds up in federal court. He pushed the folder toward me again. This document here is the authorization. It gives me the power to set up the trust structure so that it is ready to receive the assets the moment you trigger it. Signing this does not move the money yet. You cannot do that until you are an adult, but it loads the gun. All you have to do on your birthday is pull the trigger. I reached for the pen. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen. My hand was trembling. Not a lot, but enough that I had to grip the barrel tightly to steady it. This was it. This was the point of no return. I thought about Grandma sitting on the porch in the rain. Price versus value. I thought about Logan asking for a truck paid for with my home. I thought about the man on the porch who would be standing there tomorrow morning. I pressed the nib to the paper. The ink flowed black and permanent. I wrote my name. Brooke Callahan. The signature looked different than usual. It looked sharper, older. I set the pen down. "It is done," I whispered. Elliot took the paper. He did not smile. This was not a happy occasion. It was a necessary amputation. He checked the signature, stamped it with his notary seal, and placed it in a safe behind his desk. "When you trigger the transfer on your birthday," Elliot said, "I will receive a notification instantly. I will file the deed recording electronically with the county immediately. By the time they wake up the next morning, the public record will already show the trust as the owner." He walked me to the door. Before I stepped out into the afternoon sun, he placed a hand on my shoulder. "One last piece of advice, Brooke," he said. "When the explosion happens, and it will happen, do not engage. Do not try to justify yourself. Do not scream back. You have the truth, and you have the law. Arguments are for people who are afraid they are wrong. You are right." "I won't say a word," I promised. "Let the law speak," he repeated. "It has a much louder voice." I walked out of the office and onto the sidewalk. The world looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago. Cars were driving by. People were walking their dogs. But I felt like I was walking on a different planet. I had just fired my parents. I had just evicted my family from my life. I caught my reflection in a shop window. The girl staring back did not look like a victim anymore. She looked like someone who had just planted a bomb and was walking away before the fuse ran out. I got on the bus and went home to eat dinner with the people I had just betrayed, and for the first time in years, the food did not taste like ash. It tasted like the last meal of a prisoner who knows the jailbreak is scheduled for dawn. The dinner was my idea. It was a tactical maneuver disguised as a peace offering. After the tension of the last few weeks, the relentless texts from Uncle Derek, the transfer papers ambush from my father, and the silent pressure from my mother, I told them I wanted to have one nice family meal at the cabin before the big day. They interpreted the big day as the moment I would sign over my rights. I interpreted it as the moment the nuclear warhead I had armed with Elliot Vance would finally detonate. I spent the afternoon cooking. I roasted a chicken with rosemary and lemon, mashed 5 pounds of potatoes, and glazed carrots with the honey from the local apiary Grandma used to support. It was a labor of love for people who did not know the meaning of the word. As I chopped vegetables, I felt like a director setting the stage for the final act of a tragedy. I wanted the setting to be perfect. I wanted the fire roaring, the wine breathing, and the smell of home cooking filling the air. I wanted them to feel comfortable. Because people who are comfortable get careless. They arrived in a caravan of high spirits. My father brought a bottle of wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. My mother brought a store-bought pie. Uncle Derek brought his loud laugh and an energy that felt frantic and caffeinated. Logan walked in with his eyes glued to his phone, barely grunting a hello before flopping onto the sofa. "Smells incredible, honey," Mom said, kissing my cheek. Her lips felt cold. "See? This is what we have been saying. You are such a domestic goddess. You will make a wonderful wife one day. You do not need to be worrying about property taxes and zoning laws." "Thanks, Mom," I said, accepting the backhanded compliment with a practiced smile. We sat down at the heavy oak table. For the first 20 minutes, it was almost pleasant. The wine flowed, the food was passed around, and the conversation stayed on safe topics: the weather, the local football team, a scandal involving a neighbor back in the suburbs. If you looked through the window, you would see a picture-perfect American family enjoying a rustic getaway. But I was not looking through the window. I was looking at their hands. I watched Uncle Derek's hand shake slightly as he lifted his glass. I watched my father's hand clench into a fist on the table whenever the silence stretched too long. They were jittery. They were anticipating the payoff. They were treating this dinner not as a meal, but as a victory lap. I decided to fire the starter pistol. "You know," I said, setting my fork down and wiping my mouth carefully with a napkin, "I have been doing a lot of thinking about what you guys said, about the burden of this place." The clinking of silverware stopped instantly. 4 pairs of eyes locked onto me. The intensity was palpable, sucking the oxygen out of the room. "And?" my father asked. He tried to sound casual, but his voice was tight. "And I was just wondering," I continued, keeping my voice soft, innocent. "What if this house did not belong to any of us? I mean, hypothetically, if Grandma had not left it to me, if it was just gone, would we still come up here? Would we still care about this mountain?" I let the question hang there. It was a test, a chance for someone, anyone, to say, "Of course we would. Brooke, we love the memories. We love the time together." The silence stretched for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Then Uncle Derek laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. "Well, that is a philosophical question, isn't it?" he said, reaching for the wine bottle to refill his glass to the brim. "But in the real world, Brooke, we deal with assets. And if this place wasn't ours, we wouldn't be sitting on a gold mine. We'd be renting it from some stranger for $3,000 a week." "Derek is right," my father chimed in, leaning back in his chair. The mask of the loving father slipped, revealing the cold calculator underneath. "The what if doesn't matter. The reality is the market value. You talk about caring about the mountain. The best way to care for an asset is to liquidate it at peak value and diversify. Holding on to a single, illiquid property in a volatile market, that is not sentiment, that is negligence." "It is just too much for you," my mother added, her voice dripping with that fake, suffocating concern. "I look at you, sweetie, and I see how tired you are, trying to keep up with the gardening, the cleaning. If we sell, you are free. We can take that money and put it into a trust for you, controlled by your father, of course, and you just get a check. You can travel, you can shop, you do not have to scrub toilets." "Travel?" Logan perked up, his mouth full of potatoes. He swallowed hard and turned his phone screen toward me. "Check this out. I found these vacation rentals in Cabo. If we sell this dump, we could rent a place like this for, a month every summer. It has an infinity pool. This place doesn't even have cable." "It is not a dump, Logan," I said quietly. "Compared to this?" He tapped the screen. "Yeah, it is. Look, Brooke, just sign the papers tomorrow. Dad said once the money hits the account, I can get the Raptor. I already customized the rims online." There it was, the truth, naked and ugly, sitting right there on the dinner table next to the roasted chicken. They did not see a home. They saw an ATM machine. "So," I said, pushing the knife a little deeper into the wound, "if we sell, how would that work? I mean, the will left it to me." "Details," Uncle Derek said, waving his fork. "Once you transfer the title to the family LLC, we handle the distribution. It is only fair. Brooke, your dad paid for the funeral. I have put in time. We split the proceeds, 40% to your parents, to cover all the years they raised you. I take 20 for managing the sale. I have the connections. Remember? You and Logan split the rest. Put it in a college fund." I did the math in my head. They were proposing I take 20% of my own inheritance. They were robbing me in broad daylight and calling it fairness. 20%, I repeated. That seems low. It is standard. My father lied. He did not even blink. You are young. You do not need access to that kind of capital. It ruins kids your age. Look at the lottery winners. They go broke in 5 years. We are protecting you from yourself. Plus, my mother added, think of what we can do for the family. We could pay off the mortgage on the main house. We could finally join the country club. We could have security. Do not you want us to be secure? Brooke, after everything we have done for you? Everything you have done, I echoed. Private school. My father listed, ticking off fingers. Braces, piano lessons, food on the table. We invested in you. Brooke, now it is time for the return on investment. That is how families work. It is a unit. One person succeeds. Everyone eats. I looked at Logan. He was not listening to Dad's speech. He was scrolling through Amazon now, adding gaming equipment to a wish list. He was spending money that did not exist yet. I looked at Derek. He was sweating, his leg bouncing under the table. He looked like a junkie waiting for a fix. I looked at my parents. They looked self-righteous. They genuinely believed that stripping me of my grandmother's legacy was a moral act. They had twisted their greed into a virtue. I see, I said. So the plan is already made. The split is already decided. It is a draft, my father said magnanimously. But yes, it makes the most sense. We just need you to be a good girl tomorrow morning. The notary comes at 9 o'clock. You sign the transfer to the LLC. We sign the listing agreement with the developer by noon. Simple, clean, done. Clean, I whispered. Uncle Derek reached across the corner of the table and squeezed my shoulder. His hand was heavy and damp. You are thinking about this too much, kiddo, he said, offering me a smile that showed too many teeth. You are smart. You know this is the only play. You get to walk away with a nice chunk of change and zero responsibility. You are doing the right thing. For everyone. For everyone. That was the phrase that sealed it. In that moment, looking at Derek's bloodshot eyes and my father's arrogant smirk, the last tiny shred of guilt I'd been holding on to evaporated. It vanished like mist in the sun. I had wondered, in the darkest parts of the night, if I was being cruel. I had wondered if I was the villain for locking them out. But sitting here, listening to them divvy up the carcass of my sanctuary before it was even dead, I realized I was not the villain. I was the karma. They had not come here to celebrate my birthday. They had come here to harvest me. They assumed I was the same passive, quiet girl who had swallowed her pride when they ignored her achievements and bailed out her brother. They assumed I was weak. They did not know that silence is not weakness. Silence is where you sharpen the knife. You are right, Uncle Derek, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I even managed to smile. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. I need to stop worrying. I need to do what is best for the future. Exactly, my father boomed, slapping the table. That is my girl. Smart, practical. To the future, my mother cheered, raising her glass. To the raptor, Logan muttered, raising his soda can. I raised my glass of water. To the future, I said. And as I drank, I watched them celebrate a victory that had already been stolen from them. They were toasting to a fortune that was currently sitting in a digital vault, protected by an encryption key they would never possess. They were laughing and planning and spending, completely unaware that the girl sitting across from them, the girl they thought was their golden goose, was actually the executioner. The dinner continued for another hour. They ate the pie. They finished the wine. They talked about where they would go for Christmas with the money. I just sat there, nodding, listening, and memorizing every word. I wanted to remember this. I wanted to remember exactly how confident they looked, because tomorrow morning, when the sun came up over the ridge and the moving truck pulled into the driveway, I wanted to be able to compare this moment to the look on their faces when they realized the bank was closed. Permanently. The sound of a tire crushing rock is distinct. It is a heavy, grinding crunch that vibrates through the floorboards. That was how I woke up on the first day of my 18th year. It was not the chirping of birds or the gentle light of the sun filtering through the pines. It was the sound of a diesel engine idling and the hiss of air brakes engaging right outside my front door. I looked at the digital clock on my nightstand. It was 6:30 in the morning. My father had said the notary would arrive at 9. Apparently, the demolition crew decided to get a head start. I did not panic. I did not rush to the window with my heart in my throat. I simply got out of bed, dressed in the jeans and flannel shirt I had laid out the night before, and put on my boots. I tied the laces tight, pulling the loops until they were secure. It felt like I was strapping on armor. When I opened the front door, the morning air was cold and smelled of exhaust fumes. A massive, boxy moving truck was parked in the driveway, blocking the exit. It was white and unmarked, the kind you rent when you want to disappear quickly. My family was already in motion, swarming around it like ants on a dropped sugar cube. My father was standing by the hood of his sedan, using the flat surface as a desk. He was organizing a stack of manila folders, his posture rigid with authority. When he saw me step onto the porch, he did not say happy birthday. He did not ask how I slept. He slapped the folder with his palm. "Good, you are up," he shouted over the rumble of the truck engine. "We need to get moving. The schedule is tight." "What is this?" I asked, descending the steps slowly. "The notary isn't due for hours." "Change of plans," he said, not even looking at me. He was too busy checking boxes on a list. "We are clearing the property now. It is easier to show the developers an empty shell than a house full of clutter. The house belongs to your mother and me now, for all intents and purposes, so we are taking executive action." He said it with such absolute certainty. The house belongs to us now. In his mind, the ink was already dry. My compliance was a foregone conclusion, a minor formality he had already mentally bypassed. "Mom is inside starting on the kitchen," he continued, gesturing vaguely toward the door I had just exited. "You need to help her pack your personal things. Keep it to 2 boxes. Brooke, the rest goes to storage or the dump. You won't have room for it in the dorms anyway." I walked past him. I saw my mother through the kitchen window. She was moving with a frantic, manic energy, slapping neon orange stickers onto the cabinets. Trash. Keep. Sell. She was labeling my life. She was labeling Grandma's life. Logan was leaning against the side of the truck, scrolling on his phone. He looked up as I approached, a smirk playing on his lips. He looked like a prince surveying a kingdom he had done nothing to conquer. "Better hurry up, sis," he said, kicking a piece of gravel toward me. "Dad says the staging crew is coming tomorrow, so you need to be gone by tonight. We need your room for the equipment storage." "Tonight?" I asked. "Yeah, Tux and I are going to crash here this weekend to supervise the renovations." He made air quotes with his fingers, laughing. "Meaning we are going to throw a rager. So, don't let the door hit you." He turned back to his phone, dismissing me. He was kicking me out of my own home so he could turn it into a frat house. But the worst was Uncle Derek. He was directing 2 men in blue jumpsuits who looked bored and tired. They were hauling furniture out of the living room, my living room. But Derek wasn't focusing on the heavy items. He was pointing at the specific things that made the cabin a home. "Take that quilt," Derek barked, pointing to the handmade patchwork draped over the sofa, the one Grandma had stitched from my grandfather's old flannel shirts. "And that clock on the mantel, the old one, it is an eyesore. Toss it in the back. We need to modernize this space." "Careful with the wood," one of the movers grunted, lifting the rocking chair, Grandma's chair. "Just get it out," Derek snapped. "We are stripping this place down to the studs. I want everything that smells like old lady gone by noon. We are selling a luxury lifestyle here, not a museum." He was trying to erase her. He knew exactly what those items meant to me. And he was targeting them first. It was a psychological strike. He wanted to destabilize me, to make me feel like I had already lost, so that when the notary arrived, I would sign just to make the hurting stop. I felt a surge of bile rise in my throat, hot and acidic. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run over there and snatch the quilt from his hands. I wanted to tell Logan he was a parasite and tell my father he was a thief. But I didn't. I remembered Elliot's voice. Do not engage. Let the law speak. I stood by the railing, my hands clasped behind my back to hide the fact that my fists were clenched so hard my fingernails were cutting into my palms. I watched them violate my sanctuary. I watched them dismantle my history. I let the image burn into my retinas. My father walked up the steps, holding a pen. Here, he said, thrusting a clipboard at me. Since you are awake, sign the authorization for the movers. It basically says you agree to the removal of contents. Just a liability thing. He was trying to trick me. He wanted my signature on anything to establish a precedent of consent. I am not signing that, I said. My voice was quiet, barely a whisper over the wind. He sighed, an exaggerated, theatrical sound of frustration. Brooke, do not start being difficult now. We had a nice dinner. We have a plan. Just sign the paper so we can get this junk out of here and get you your money. It is not junk, I said. It is wood and fabric, he snapped, his patience snapping like a dry twig. It has no value. The land has value. Now stop acting like a child and— Hey, Derek shouted from the yard. Is the attic unlocked? I want to check for copper piping. My father turned to yell back, Use the crowbar if you have to. They were looting me. They were literally looting me. And they were enjoying it. That was the moment, the peak of their arrogance. They were so loud, so consumed by their own greed, so busy dividing the spoils, that they didn't hear the back door of the cabin open. They didn't hear the heavy, measured footsteps crossing the wooden porch behind me. I did not turn around. I knew who it was. I had unlocked the back door at 5 o'clock in the morning, just as we had planned via encrypted text. Excuse me, a voice boomed. It was a baritone voice, deep and resonant, cutting through the morning air like a gavel strike. My father froze. He turned around slowly, annoyance written all over his face, expecting perhaps a neighbor or a delivery driver. Uncle Derek looked up from the rocking chair he was dragging. Logan looked up from his phone. The silence that followed was instant and absolute. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Standing on the porch, emerging from the shadows of the eaves, was Elliot Vance. He was not wearing hiking gear. He was wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than my brother's dream truck. His tie was silk. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, and he held a thick leather legal binder against his chest. But he was not alone. Standing next to him, with a hand resting casually on his utility belt, was Officer Marlowe from the County Sheriff's Department. He was a large man, a local who had known my grandmother for 30 years. He was not smiling. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked from Elliot to the officer, then to me, his brain trying to misfire and recalibrate at the same time. Who? My father stammered. Who are you? This is private property. Elliot took one step forward. The wood creaked under his expensive shoe. You are absolutely correct. Mr. Callahan, Elliot said. His voice was calm, terrifyingly polite. This is private property, and I am here to ensure that the trespassers currently looting it are removed. Trespassers? My mother laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound from the bottom of the stairs. We are the owners. I am her mother. We are just clearing out the old furniture. Elliot did not look at her. He looked at the movers holding Grandma's chair. Put the chair down, Elliot ordered. He did not shout, but the command whipped through the air like a lash. Place it back on the porch, now. The movers looked at Derek. Derek looked at Dad. Dad looked at Elliot. Now see here. My father stepped up, puffing out his chest, trying to regain control of the narrative. I don't know who you think you are, but I am Rick Callahan. This is my daughter's house, and we are handling her affairs. We have a verbal agreement. I am Elliot Vance, the lawyer said. I am the executor of the late Eleanor Callahan's estate and the appointed trustee of the Brooke Callahan Irrevocable Trust. He opened the leather binder. The metal ring snapped open with a sharp click. As of 12 o'clock and 1 minute this morning, Elliot continued, pulling out a document with a gold seal at the bottom, The title to this land, this structure, and all contents therein was legally transferred to the trust. Miss Brooke Callahan is the beneficiary. She holds no legal authority to sell, transfer, or liquidate this asset, and you, Mr. Callahan, have zero authority to be on this premises without the express written invitation of the trustee. Elliot slammed the binder shut. I did not invite you, Elliot said. My father's face went from red to a ghostly, chalky white. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, searching for the scared little girl who always did what she was told. He was looking for the daughter who fixed her own problems so she wouldn't be a burden. Brooke, he whispered, what did you do? I stood there, feeling the wind blow through the flannel shirt. I looked at the truck. I looked at the stickers on the furniture. I looked at the greed that had finally been cornered. For the first time in 18 years, I did not feel heavy. I did not feel the crushing weight of their expectations. I felt light. I felt like the air up here finally belonged to me. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 14 years old. It was a long, slow exhale that emptied my lungs of all the fear, all the silence, and all the years of being second best. I looked at my father and said nothing. I just stepped to the side, clearing the line of sight between him and the sheriff. The trap was sprung, and I was just the bait. The silence that descended on the driveway was heavy enough to crush a lung. Elliot Vance did not stop moving. He descended the porch steps with a slow, deliberate cadence, the gravel crunching softly beneath his polished Oxfords. Officer Marlowe stayed a few paces behind him, his thumbs hooked into his belt, his presence a silent, looming threat that transformed this from a family dispute into a crime scene. I asked a question, Elliot said, stopping 3 feet from my father. He looked at the movers, who were frozen mid-step with a heavy oak dresser balanced between them. Put that down, now, and step away from the truck. If you move one more item of personal property into that vehicle, you will be considered accessories to grand larceny. The movers did not need to be told twice. They set the dresser down on the dirt with a thud and backed away, hands raised, looking at my uncle with accusation in their eyes. My father, Rick Callahan, recovered his voice first. It was a blustering, shaky thing, the sound of a man trying to inflate a punctured tire. Now, listen here, he said, puffing out his chest. You are throwing around a lot of big words, but you are out of your depth. I am the girl's father. I am the legal guardian. She is 18, Elliot cut in, his voice sharp as a razor. As of yesterday, your guardianship expired the moment the clock struck 12. That is a technicality, Dad spat. He reached into the open window of his sedan and pulled out the manila folder he had been guarding so jealously all morning. He waved it in the air like a weapon. We have the paperwork, signed, sealed, and notarized. We anticipated this. Transition. Brooke agreed to transfer the deed to a family management company for tax purposes. It is all here, legal and binding. I watched my father's face. He truly believed it. He was so accustomed to bending reality to his will, so used to bullying the world into giving him what he wanted, that he thought a piece of paper could override the law. Elliot extended his hand. May I? Dad hesitated, then thrust the folder at him with a sneer. Go ahead, read it and weep, then get off my property. Elliot opened the folder. He adjusted his glasses. The air was so still I could hear the pages turning. Officer Marlowe shifted his weight, the leather of his holster creaking. Interesting, Elliot murmured. He did not look up. This appears to be a quitclaim deed, transferring the property at Black Ridge to Callahan Holdings, LLC, dated 2 days ago. Exactly, Dad said, crossing his arms. Like I said, done deal. And here is the signature, Elliot continued, tracing a line with his finger. Brooke Callahan, and a notary stamp from Quick Seal Online Notary Services, based in Nevada. It is a digital world, Uncle Derek piped up from the porch, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. We used an e-notary, perfectly legal. Elliot looked up then. He closed the folder with a snap that sounded like a gunshot. Actually, Elliot said, it is not legal. In fact, it is a felony. Excuse me? My mother shrieked, clutching her pearl necklace. How dare you accusing us of— I am not accusing, Elliot said calmly. I am stating facts. Fact number 1. The notary seal on this document is invalid. I ran a check on this commission number when your brother-in-law tried to file a preliminary lien notice last week. Yes, we saw that. Mr. Callahan, the commission number belongs to a notary who has been deceased for 3 years. Derek's face went the color of dirty snow. He took a half step back, bumping into the railing. That must be a clerical error, Derek stammered. The website said— Fact number 2, Elliot interrupted, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder, harder. This signature, it reads, Brooke Callahan, but I have been Brooke's attorney for 2 years. I have her legal signature on file, witnessed in person. This script? The slant is wrong. The pressure points are wrong. Elliot turned his gaze toward the truck. He was not looking at my parents. He was looking at my brother. And, Elliot added, it bears a striking resemblance to the handwriting on a speeding ticket citation issued to a Mr. Logan Callahan 3 months ago, a citation that is currently unpaid. My stomach turned over. I looked at Logan. My brother was no longer the smug prince leaning against the truck. He was standing upright, his phone clutched in his hand, his eyes wide with genuine terror. He looked from Dad to Derek, then to the police officer. Wait, Logan said, his voice cracking. Dad, you said it was fine. Shut up, Logan, Dad hissed through his teeth. No, you said it was just for insurance. Logan's voice rose, shrill and panicked. You told me Brooke was busy studying and she told you to handle it, so I just needed to sign her name to get the insurance adjuster out here. You said it was a formality. The confession hung in the air, vibrating. I stared at my brother. My heart broke. Not for me, but for him. He was 17. He was arrogant and spoiled. Yes, but he was stupid. He did not know what a quitclaim deed was. He did not know what forgery meant in the eyes of the law. My parents had not just tried to steal my house. They had handed the pen to their favorite son and told him to commit the crime for them. They had set him up as the fall guy. Logan, I whispered, but he didn't hear me. Officer Marlowe stepped forward. He was not resting his hand on his belt anymore. He had his notepad out. Let me get this straight, Marlowe said, his voice flat and bored, the voice of a man who had seen too many domestic disputes turn ugly. You are telling me, son, that you signed your sister's name on a legal document transferring property worth over $1 million at the instruction of your father? I didn't know it was for the property, Logan stammered, backing away until he hit the side of the truck. Dad gave me the paper. Uncle Derek showed me where to sign. They said Brooke knew about it. We did no such thing, Mom shouted, turning on Logan instantly. Logan, do not you lie to the officer. We never told you to sign her name. I gasped. I actually gasped aloud. I watched my mother, the woman who had coddled Logan his entire life, the woman who had bought him pizza when he got suspended, throw him under the bus without a second of hesitation, to save herself, to save the facade. You are lying, Logan screamed, tears welling up in his eyes. You stood right there in the kitchen and handed me the pen. You said Brooke's signature was too messy and mine looked better. That is enough, Elliot cut in. He looked at my father, who was now sweating profusely, the confident patriarch dissolving into a trembling con artist. Mr. Callahan, Elliot said, uttering a forged instrument, conspiracy to commit fraud, grand larceny, and, since you dragged a minor into it, contributing to the delinquency of a minor. We are looking at a laundry list of charges that carries a mandatory prison sentence. We are family, Dad shouted, his voice desperate. You cannot arrest a father for managing his family's assets. This is a domestic misunderstanding. Brooke, he turned to me, his eyes wild. Brooke, tell them you told us to handle it. Don't let them ruin your brother's life. He is just a kid. He was doing it again. He was using Logan as a shield. Don't let them ruin your brother's life. He wasn't asking me to save him. He was guilt-tripping me with Logan's future to cover his own crimes. Family, Elliot said, stepping between me and my father. Family is not a legal defense, Mr. Callahan, and it certainly is not an exemption from the penal code. This is a mistake, Derek tried to interject, holding up his hands. Look, we used an online service. If the seal is fake, we are the victims here. We were scammed by the internet. Elliot reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He held it up for Derek to see. I anticipated you might say that, Elliot said. So I had my forensic accountant run a trace on the IP address that created the account for Quick Seal Online. It traces back to a laptop registered to a Derek Callahan. The confirmation email for the forgery instructions was sent to an address, derekcbiz@email.com. Elliot lowered the paper. You did not get scammed. Derek, you built the scam. You created a fake notary identity to bypass the system because no legitimate notary would touch this transaction without Brooke present. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. There was no way out. The evidence was not just overwhelming, it was absolute. Officer, Elliot said, turning to Marlowe, I am formally requesting that these individuals be removed from the property. I am also filing a formal complaint regarding the attempted theft of assets held in a federally regulated trust. Marlowe nodded. He looked at my father. Mr. Callahan, Mrs. Callahan, Mr. Derek Callahan, you have exactly 5 minutes to get your personal vehicle off this property. The truck stays until we can inventory what you tried to steal. If you are still here in 6 minutes, you will leave in the back of my cruiser. And the boy? Marlowe asked, pointing at Logan. Elliot looked at me. It was the only time he deferred to me. He was asking if I wanted to press the button that would nuke Logan's future. I looked at my brother. He was sliding down the side of the truck, sitting in the dirt, his head in his hands. He was sobbing, not the angry, entitled tears of a denied toddler, but the terrified, broken sobs of someone whose entire worldview had just shattered. He realized, finally, that he wasn't the golden child. He was just the signature they needed because they knew he was dumb enough to provide it. He stays, I said. My voice was hoarse. He didn't know. He is stupid. But he didn't know. Brooke, Mom cried out, reaching for me. You can't do this to us. We are your parents. Officer, Elliot said sharply. Remove them. Marlowe stepped forward, his hand resting on his handcuffs. Ma'am, step back. Now. My parents scrambled. The dignity was gone. The arrogance was gone. They were just two scared grifters running from the consequences of their own greed. They ran to the sedan, arguing with each other the whole way. I told you it was too risky, Mom shrieked at Dad. You said she was too stupid to notice, Dad yelled back. It was Derek's idea, they both shouted in unison. Derek was already running for his own car, abandoning them. They piled into the sedan, tires spinning in the gravel as they reversed frantically, nearly hitting the moving truck in their haste to escape the sheriff. They didn't look back at me. They didn't look back at Logan. They just drove. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannons have stopped. I walked over to where Logan was sitting in the dirt. He didn't look up. He was staring at his expensive sneakers, now covered in dust. They left me, he whispered. They just left. I know, I said. I didn't offer him a hand. I didn't hug him. I just stood there, letting the shadow of the house, my house, fall over both of us. They used you. Logan, they knew if the forgery was caught, you would be the one on the paper. They insured themselves with your future. He looked up at me. His face was red and blotchy. I am sorry, Brooke. I just wanted the truck. I know, I said again, and that is why they picked you. Elliot walked over, the binder tucked under his arm. He looked at Logan with a mixture of pity and disdain. You are lucky your sister is the beneficiary and not me, Elliot said to him, because if it were up to me, you would be in the car with the sheriff. Elliot turned to me. The movers will unload everything back into the house. I will stay and supervise. Officer Marlowe will file the report. You do not need to do anything else today." "Thank you, Elliot," I said. I looked at the road where my parents' car had disappeared. The dust was still settling. They were gone. They had lost the house. They had lost the money. And they had lost the daughter they treated like an employee. But the cruelest part was that they had also destroyed the son they claimed to love, just to save their own skins for a few more minutes. I turned back to the cabin. It stood firm against the mountain, unbothered by the noise of small, greedy people. "Get up, Logan," I said. "You are going to help the movers put everything back exactly where it was." He nodded, wiping his nose with his sleeve, and stood up. He didn't argue. He didn't ask for money. For the first time in his life, he just did what he was told, because he finally understood who was actually in charge. My parents likely spent that afternoon sitting in a motel room on the outskirts of town, drinking vending machine coffee and convincing themselves that the worst was over. They probably told each other that I was just throwing a temper tantrum, that the lawyer was a bluff, and that given 48 hours to cool down, I would come crawling back to the fold. They relied on the version of Brooke they had constructed in their heads, the girl who craved their approval like oxygen. They did not know that the girl they were waiting for had died the moment I saw my brother holding a pen he did not understand. They thought the morning's confrontation was the end of the movie. They did not realize it was merely the opening scene of the sequel. I did not go back to sleep after the moving truck left. I spent the rest of the day and most of the night with Elliot Vance in his office, assembling a war chest. We were not just building a defense, we were building a cage. "Most people stop here," Elliot told me as he poured 2 cups of black coffee. It was 3 a.m. "They get the thieves off the property. They change the locks, and they hope the family learns a lesson. But people like your father and uncle do not learn lessons. They only learn consequences." "I do not want them to learn," I said, staring at the glowing screen of his laptop. "I want them to be unable to move." "Then we open the second drawer," Elliot said. The second drawer was a metaphor Elliot used for the aggressive litigation strategy he kept in reserve for scorched earth scenarios. It began with a temporary restraining order, but not the standard kind that simply says, "Stay 500 feet away." This was a comprehensive financial injunction. We were petitioning the court to freeze any assets that might have been commingled with mine and to legally bar them from communicating with any entity regarding the Black Ridge property. To get a judge to sign a generic order is easy. To get a judge to sign an order this restrictive, you need proof of malice. And I had it. I pulled out my phone and synced it to Elliot's server. I uploaded 2 years of text messages. I uploaded the screenshots of Uncle Derek's real estate links sent at 2 a.m. I uploaded the voicemails where my mother switched from sweet to threatening in the span of 30 seconds. But the nail in the coffin was the video files. "I did not know you installed cameras," Elliot said, raising an eyebrow as he opened the file labeled Living Room 0700.mp4. "I bought them online 3 months ago," I explained. "They look like smoke detectors. I installed them when I went up to clean one weekend. I knew they would try to get in before I arrived." We watched the footage together in silence. The timestamp showed 7:15 in the morning, 45 minutes before I had walked out onto the porch. On the screen, Uncle Derek was standing in the middle of the living room with the lead mover. The audio was crystal clear. "What about the girl?" the mover asked. "Is she going to be a problem? The work order says occupied." Derek waved his hand dismissively. "Ignore her. If she comes out, do not talk to her. Do not ask the owner anything. I am the one paying you. Just get the expensive stuff on the truck first. If she makes a fuss, tell her to call her daddy. We need to have the main floor cleared before the notary shows up, so she feels like she has no place to stay." "That is premeditation," Elliot said, hitting pause. "That is not a family dispute. That is a conspiracy to inflict emotional distress to facilitate a fraudulent transfer." "Is it enough?" I asked. "It is enough to bury them," Elliot replied. We filed the motion at 8 o'clock the next morning. By noon, the sheriff's deputy, not Marlowe, but a process server, had located my parents at the Motel 6 and served them. The reaction was immediate. My phone, which I had set to forward all calls to Elliot's office, stayed silent, but Elliot's office line lit up like a Christmas tree. Elliot put it on speaker. "This is ridiculous." My father's voice filled the room, tinny and distorted but unmistakable in its panic. "You cannot serve me with a restraining order. I am her father. We are trying to help her." "Mr. Callahan," Elliot said, his voice bored. "All communication must now go through my office. If you attempt to contact Brooke directly, or if you set foot within 1 mile of the Black Ridge property, you will be held in contempt of court and arrested. This is not a warning, it is a promise. We can work this out." My mother's voice chimed in. She sounded breathless, likely crying. "Please, Mr. Vance, tell her we are sorry. We just got carried away. We were stressed about money. Look, we can compromise. We will drop the claim on the house. We just want peace." "Peace," I whispered to myself. "We can split the proceeds," my father interrupted, pivoting back to the only thing he cared about. 50-50? That is generous. She keeps the house. We take a cash settlement for our emotional investment in raising her. We call it even. No courts, no jail for anyone." I looked at Logan. My brother was sitting in the corner of Elliot's office. I had dragged him with me because I did not trust him to be alone. And frankly, he had nowhere else to go. He had been listening to the call, his face pale. 50-50? Logan said. He stood up and walked to the desk. "Who is that?" Dad asked. "Is that Logan? Son, tell her. Tell her we need to settle this." "You tried to send me to jail," Logan said. His voice was shaking, but it was louder than I had ever heard it. "Logan, honey, don't be dramatic," Mom said soothingly. "We would never let that happen. It was a misunderstanding." "You blamed me," Logan shouted at the speakerphone. "I heard you. To the cop. You said I did it. You said I signed it. If Brooke hadn't stopped them, I would be in a cell right now while you guys drove away." "Logan, stop," Dad barked. "You do not understand business." "I understand that you are a liar," Logan spat. "And I am not signing anything else for you, ever." Elliot cut the connection. The silence that followed was heavy, but it felt clean. Logan sat back down, putting his head in his hands. He looked smaller than usual, stripped of the bravado my parents had pumped into him for years. He was just a kid realizing his heroes were villains. "They are terrified," Elliot noted. "They moved to bargaining within 4 hours. That means they have exposed leverage." "What kind of leverage?" I asked. "Debt," Elliot said, "and partners they cannot control." The answer came 2 hours later, from a source I did not expect. Uncle Derek called. He did not call the office line. He called Logan's phone. Logan looked at the screen, saw the name Uncle D, and looked at me. "Answer it," Elliot commanded. "Put it on speaker." Logan tapped the screen. "Hello?" "Logan, listen to me." Derek's voice was a harsh whisper. He sounded like he was walking fast, wind buffeting the microphone. "Is your sister there? Do not tell your dad I am calling. I need to talk to her." I leaned over the desk. "I am here, Derek, and Elliot is listening, and this is being recorded." "Fine. Good. Record it," Derek said. "Look, Brooke, you have to call off the dogs. You have to drop the lawsuit. If you sue for fraud, they are going to look into my finances." "That sounds like a you problem, Derek," I said cold. No. "You do not understand," he hissed. "It is not just the bank. I borrowed money. From people who do not use collection agencies. I told them the sale was a sure thing. I told them the buyer was lined up." "What buyer?" Elliot asked sharply. There was a pause, a long, hesitation-filled silence. "There was a broker," Derek admitted, his voice trembling. "A guy named Sutton. He approached me 3 months ago. He represents a consortium. He knew about the resort before it was public. He knew your grandma left the house to a kid. He told me if I could get you to sell fast. Before the market officially spiked, he would give me a $50,000 finder's fee under the table. He said the best way was to scare you, to make you think the taxes would bankrupt you. I felt a chill run down my spine. It was not just greed, it was a setup. My own uncle had conspired with a corporate shark to gaslight me into selling my heritage for pennies on the dollar, just so he could pay off a gambling debt. The taxes are tripling speech. The maintenance is too high narrative. It was all a script written by a stranger and performed by my family. You sold me out, I said, for $50,000. I needed the money. Brooke, Derek pleaded. They are going to break my legs. Please, just sign the deal. Sutton is still willing to buy. He says he can make the legal trouble go away if you sell today. Tell Mr. Sutton, I said, my voice steady and hard as the mountain stone, that the price just went up, and the currency is not dollars. It is prison time. I nodded to Elliot. He hung up the phone. I sat back in the leather chair. I looked at the video freeze frame of Derek on the screen. I looked at the text logs. I looked at the pathetic, crumbling empire of lies my family had built. I did not feel fear. I did not feel hesitation. I felt clarity. For years, I thought I was fighting a battle for their love. Then I thought I was fighting a battle for my house. Now I realized I was fighting a battle for my dignity. They had not just tried to steal a building, they had tried to steal my reality. They had tried to make me believe I was incompetent, weak, and dependent, all to serve a scheme hatched in a backroom by men who viewed my grandmother's legacy as a line item on a spreadsheet. They are going to come back, Logan said quietly. Dad is not going to stop. He is too desperate. I know, I said. He thinks he is cornered. He thinks if he pushes hard enough, I will break. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city was moving, oblivious to the war being waged in this office. Let them come, I said. They are playing checkers. They think they can bluff and bully their way out of this. I turned back to Elliot. Open the third drawer, I said. We are not just filing for a restraining order anymore. I want to file a civil RICO suit, conspiracy, fraud, wire fraud, and emotional damages. I want to depose this Sutton character. I want to subpoena Derek's phone records. I want to drag every single shadow they have into the light. Elliot smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. I was hoping you would say that, he said. The trap I had set on the porch was just the beginning. I was about to pull the rope that would bring the entire ceiling down on their heads. The courtroom was sterile, smelling faintly of lemon polish and old carpet, a stark contrast to the scent of pine and earth that I was fighting to protect. Civil courtrooms do not have the dramatic flair of the movies. There is no swelling music, no sudden gasps from a packed gallery. There is just the quiet, grinding machinery of the law. The hearing was expedited thanks to the mountain of evidence Elliot had filed. My parents sat on the other side of the aisle. They looked smaller than I remembered. My father was wearing his best suit, but it hung loosely on him, as if his confidence had been the only thing filling it out. My mother refused to look at me, keeping her eyes fixed on a spot on the wall, her hands twisting a handkerchief into a tight white knot. Uncle Derek was there too, sitting separately from them, looking pale and sweating despite the air conditioning. Logan sat in the back row, alone. He was not a defendant, but he was the primary witness to their betrayal. He looked like a ghost. The proceedings moved with a brutal efficiency. Elliot Vance did not need to shout. He simply laid out the timeline like a deck of cards. He presented the text messages where Derek coordinated with the movers to ignore the owner. He presented the forensic report on the fake notary account created on Derek's laptop. He presented the unpaid speeding ticket that matched the forged signature on the deed. My father's attorney, a man who looked like he regretted taking the case, tried to paint a picture of a misunderstanding. He used words like familial management and protective custody of assets. Your Honor, the lawyer said, adjusting his tie nervously, Mr. and Mrs. Callahan were merely acting in what they believed to be the best financial interests of their daughter. They feared she was too young to manage such a volatile asset. The paperwork, while perhaps irregular, was drafted with the intent of preserving the family estate. Then it was my turn. I did not cry. I did not scream. I walked to the stand and sat down, folding my hands in my lap. I looked at the judge, a stern woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen every variation of human greed. "Miss Callahan," the judge said, "in your own words, tell me what happened on the morning of your 18th birthday." "They brought a truck," I said, my voice steady. "They arrived at 6:30 in the morning. They did not say happy birthday. They handed me a liability waiver and told me to pack 2 boxes. My uncle told the movers to throw away my grandmother's quilt because it looked like old lady junk. They were not preserving the estate, Your Honor. They were liquidating it. They were treating my home like a carcass they could strip for parts." I paused, looking directly at my father. He flinched. "They did not ask me if I wanted to sell," I continued. "They did not ask me if I loved the place. They only asked when they could get the check, and when I refused to give them the answer they wanted, they used my brother to commit a crime so they wouldn't have to dirty their own hands." The courtroom went silent. Then, Elliot stood up. "Your Honor, if I may, I have one final piece of evidence to submit. This is a sealed codicil to the last will and testament of Eleanor Callahan. It was instructed to be opened only in the event of a legal challenge regarding the ownership of the Black Ridge property." My father's head snapped up. He had not known about this. Neither had I. Elliot handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The judge put on her reading glasses. She read in silence for a long minute. Then, she looked over her glasses at my parents. "Mr. Callahan," the judge said, her voice dry, "did you know your mother added a specific clause regarding you?" "No," my father whispered. "I will read it for the record," the judge said. "It states, 'I am leaving this property to my granddaughter, Brooke, because she is the only one who understands its value beyond the dollar sign. Under no circumstances is the title to be transferred, sold, or managed by my son, Rick Callahan, or his brother, Derek. I fear that their greed will one day outweigh their love, and I wish to protect Brooke from the day they decide she is worth less than the land she stands on.'" A gasp did not come from the gallery. It came from my mother. She put a hand over her mouth, tears finally spilling over. Grandma had known. She had predicted this moment years ago. Sitting on the porch in the rain, she had reached out from the grave to shield me one last time. My father stood up, his face red. "It is a lie. She was senile. We did everything for this family. We just wanted everyone to have a share. It is not fair that one person gets everything." "Sit down, Mr. Callahan," the judge ordered, her gavel coming down with a sharp crack. "We did it for the family," my father shouted, desperate now. "If you did it for the family," the judge asked, her voice cutting through his hysteria like a knife, "then why did you use a forged signature? Why did you use a fake notary? Honest men do not need to lie to protect the people they love." My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. He sank back into his chair, defeated. The verdict was swift and absolute. The court ruled in favor of the trust on all counts. The judge issued a permanent restraining order, barring my parents and Derek from coming within 5 miles of the property or contacting me in any way. But the financial ruling was the true death blow, because the court found that their actions constituted malicious interference with inheritance and fraud. The judge ordered them to pay all legal fees, mine and the trust's. She also ordered them to pay punitive damages for the emotional distress and the attempted theft. I watched the color drain from my father's face as the numbers were read out. Tens of thousands of dollars. Money they did not have. Money they had been counting on getting from the sale of my house. Derek got it the worst because his finder's fee scheme with the developer was exposed in the discovery phase. The judge referred his case to the district attorney for potential criminal charges regarding the wire fraud. But even before that, the civil judgment meant his wages would be garnished for the next 20 years. The creditors he was running from would see this judgment and descend on him like vultures. He was not just broke, he was buried. As for Logan, the judge looked at him with pity. Young man, she said, the court recognizes that you were manipulated by the adults who were supposed to guide you. You will not face criminal charges. But I hope you realize today that the only person in this room who actually protected you was your sister. Logan nodded, tears streaming down his face. He looked at our parents, not with anger anymore, but with a profound, hollow disappointment. He realized he had never been the golden child. He had just been a tool, a signature, a pawn. When the session ended, I walked out of the courtroom first. I did not look back. I did not wait for an apology that would never come or would never be sincere. I drove straight back to the mountain. It was late afternoon by the time I pulled into the gravel driveway. The moving truck was gone. The silence had returned. I walked up the steps to the porch. The rocking chair, Grandma's chair, was right where it belonged. The quilt was folded neatly on the back. I stood by the railing and looked out over the valley. The mist was beginning to rise from the trees, a soft white blanket covering the world below. The air was cold and clean. For the first time in my life, the silence did not feel lonely. It felt like freedom. I was 18 years old. I had no parents to call. I had no family dinners to attend. I was an orphan by choice, severed from the rot that had tried to consume me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a new set of keys. I had stopped at the hardware store on the way back. I walked to the front door and spent the next hour changing the locks. I replaced the old brass deadbolt with a heavy-duty steel one. Every turn of the screwdriver felt like a declaration. This is mine. This is safe. When I was finished, I walked down to the end of the driveway. I hammered a small metal sign into the trunk of the old oak tree that marked the property line. Private property, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. It was not just a warning to strangers. It was a message to the past. I walked back up to the house, the gravel crunching under my boots, a sound that no longer signaled an invasion, but simply my own presence. I sat in the rocking chair and watched the sun dip below the ridge, painting the sky in violent purples and soft oranges. I thought about the price my father was so obsessed with. He had lost his daughter, his son's respect, and his financial future, all because he could not understand the value of something that wasn't for sale. I ran my hand over the wooden armrest, feeling the grain that Grandma and I had sanded down together all those years ago. The house is not a thing to be divided, I said aloud to the empty air, my voice strong and sure. It is a promise, and I am the only one who had the strength to keep it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Brooke's decision. Did she go too far? Or did she do exactly what needed to be done? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story get recommended to more people.